Hyannis was a quaint, tranquil town where life moved at a gentle pace, and every street corner seemed to hum with a quiet predictability. However, within a modest house on the outskirts of town, that serenity had been replaced by a profound sorrow. It was the home of 5-year-old Emma and her elderly grandparents, a place she had lived ever since her entire world fell apart. Her parents, celebrated dog trainers with a reputation that spanned the region, had been killed abruptly in a devastating accident. From that moment forward, Emma had not uttered a single sound. The once vibrant and inquisitive little girl had withdrawn into a silent world, her eyes vacant and her small hands clutching the memory of all she had lost. Only the 6 German shepherds, the very dogs her parents had so lovingly raised, remained as constant protectors by her side. They were not merely pets. They were her sole source of comfort, a silent guard for the broken heart of a child lost in grief. Prior to the tragedy, Emma's life had been abundant with joy and vitality. Her parents, James and Caroline, had committed themselves to training service animals, and Emma was raised amidst the sounds of barking, the consistent cadence of commands, and the profound love that filled their home. All of that was extinguished in one brutal instant. The accident left no one alive, and Emma's home transformed into an empty echo of its former self. The once lively little girl ceased speaking entirely. No words, no tears, just a disquieting stillness that felt unnaturally burdensome for someone so young. Her grandparents, Margaret and Walter, did all they could to bridge the emptiness, but they too were weighed down by their own age and sorrow. They attempted to soothe Emma, but her vacant stare remained fixed, and her little voice did not reappear. The only ones who seemed to penetrate her isolation were the 6 German shepherds, meticulously trained by her parents. Each one perceived Emma's sadness in its own unique manner. They would lie by her bed through the night, follow her quietly around the house, and rest their heads on her lap as she sat motionless by the window. They made no demands. They simply stayed, offering their quiet presence to a girl who felt utterly alone. Days stretched into weeks, and weeks bled into months, but regardless of the time that went by, Emma stayed enclosed in her sorrow. The outside world continued on, but within that house in Hyannis, everything remained frozen in time. For Emma, the 6 dogs were more than just a memento of her parents. They were her connection to life, the single thread that tied her to the world she had lost. Each morning, before the sun had completely risen over Hyannis, the same quiet ritual would play out in the small house at the street's end. As Margaret and Walter busied themselves in the kitchen with simple breakfast preparations, 6 sets of watchful eyes were already positioned outside Emma's bedroom door. The German shepherds appeared to grasp something that no one else could. They refrained from barking or scratching impatiently at the door. Instead, they remained in a calm, steady, and devoted vigil. At times, Emma would open the door just a crack, enough to see them sitting there, their tails swaying softly. Their presence served as a silent summons, a reassurance that she was not completely by herself. Gradually, she started to sit with them. She remained silent, but she would place her small hand on their heads, sensing the warmth of their fur under her fingertips. Each dog had a distinct way of comforting her. Max, the oldest, would press his head firmly into her shoulder, while Luna would nudge her gently with her nose until Emma offered the slightest hint of a smile. They never pressured her or requested anything beyond her presence. The home felt less heavy in those brief intervals. Emma's grandparents observed the subtle shifts, how she seemed to breathe more freely when the dogs were near, how her eyes would soften when they settled at her feet. For Emma, the dogs were her stability. They brought her parents back to her without needing words or photos. Every trick and obedient action held echoes of her parents' instructions. More significantly, the dogs provided something that even her caring grandparents could not entirely give: steadfast, unspoken devotion. Day by day, they remained by her side, their quiet companionship enveloping her like a protective barrier, patiently waiting for the little girl they cherished to find her way back to her true self. Margaret and Walter had consistently tried their best to keep things afloat. Although their movements were slower now and their hands often shook with age, they invested every bit of their energy into maintaining a secure and stable environment for Emma. But behind the scenes, the pressure of reality was mounting daily. Invoices accumulated on the kitchen table, veterinary bills, food costs, utilities, and their savings were depleting more quickly than they could be restored. The 6 German shepherds, as devoted and cherished as they were, demanded more resources than their modest income could provide. Late in the evenings, after Emma was asleep, the elderly couple would sit silently at their worn dining table, the quiet between them weighing more than any words. Walter would often shake his head, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. Margaret's hands would grip her teacup, her heart aching at the prospect of what they had to tell Emma. One chilly morning, they finally mustered the strength to say it. Emma was seated by the window, with one of the dogs resting its chin on her knee. Walter knelt next to her, his voice gentle but strained. "Sweetheart, we've tried everything, but we may need to find new homes for the dogs." For a moment, Emma showed no reaction. Her small hand stopped mid-pet on Max's fur. Then, wordlessly, she got up, walked past her grandparents, and vanished into her room, shutting the door softly behind her. Inside, she curled up under her blankets, her back facing the world. Meals were left untouched. She refused to come out, even when the dogs gently pawed at her door. Outside her room, the 6 German shepherds grew restless. They paced the corridor, their noses pressed to the door and ears alert, as if they had understood every word spoken. Their typical calmness had transformed into a tense, uncertain state. Max, the pack's leader, would linger by the door longer than the others, his gaze steady, as if he knew precisely what was occurring. Yet, whenever Emma opened the door even a fraction, they met her with the same quiet fortitude, tails wagging gently, eyes soft, nudging her hand to offer encouragement. Though a deep part of them sensed their days with her might be numbered, none displayed any weakness. Instead, they stood strong, resolved to help lift Emma up, if only for a short while more. Days of silence followed after Emma received the news. She hardly stirred from her room, her small frame coiled tightly beneath the covers as if trying to disappear completely. Her grandparents would knock softly, leaving food by the door, but nothing seemed to get through to her. The 6 German shepherds, however, would not surrender. Every morning, they assembled outside Emma's door, sitting with patience and waiting. Then, one by one, they started bringing her their leashes, nudging them gently against the door with eyes full of quiet determination. At first, Emma did not respond, but something about their persistence and steadfast loyalty stirred a feeling deep within her. One morning, she finally opened the door. Max was there, leash in his mouth, tail swishing slowly, his gaze locked on hers. Without a word, Emma reached down, her small fingers grazing his head. She took the leash and clipped it to Max's collar. One after another, she did the same for all the dogs, her hands firm despite the tightness in her chest. Margaret and Walter observed from the doorway, unsure what to say, their hearts filled with a mix of pain and hope. For the first time in days, Emma quietly led the dogs outside. The park was still that morning, with dew sparkling on the grass. As Emma walked, all 6 dogs moved in perfect synchrony with her, their movements practiced and effortless. Passers-by would pause, whispering with astonishment. It wasn't often that one saw a tiny 5-year-old girl calmly guiding 6 large, powerful dogs as if they were a single entity. Some people smiled, while others stared, but Emma paid them little mind. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she inhaled the crisp air, felt the pull of the leashes in her hands, and sensed the steady rhythm of the dogs at her side. With every step, a heavy weight inside her began to ease. Not completely, but enough. The dogs didn't glance back. They walked with confidence, as if to say, "We are still here. You are not alone." The morning air held a gentle chill as Emma and the dogs ventured deeper into the park. Although she remained silent, a quiet composure had settled over her. The steady rhythm of 6 leashes in her hands and the constant presence of her loyal companions beside her made everything feel ordinary. This peace was broken when Max abruptly stopped, his body tensing, ears erect, and his eyes fixed with laser-like focus on the lake at the park's edge. The other dogs perceived it too, their heads turning as one, alert yet quiet. Emma followed their line of sight, and then she saw it. A small child, not much older than 4, had slipped off the grassy bank and fallen into the water. No one else was close by, and no parents were in view. The child struggled for a moment before sinking beneath the surface. Without a second's thought, Max shot forward, the leash slipping from Emma's grasp. The others followed instantly, as though responding to an unseen signal. What occurred next happened so fast, yet with such flawless execution, that it left onlookers stunned. Max was the first to reach the water, diving in without pause. Right behind him, Luna and Rex flanked him on either side, their strong bodies slicing through the water with expert ease. On the bank, the three remaining dogs fanned out, barking sharply to attract attention and signal for assistance. Beneath the water, Max located the child and gently gripped the back of the toddler's shirt, careful not to cause harm. Luna swam alongside to keep the child steady, while Rex remained just behind, nudging them toward the bank. The entire operation seemed almost choreographed, with each dog understanding its specific role. Years of meticulous training by Emma's parents had molded them into more than just pets. They were an intelligent, disciplined team prepared for any circumstance. Gasps rippled through the park as the dogs reached the shallows, carefully dragging the child onto solid ground. Within seconds, other park visitors rushed over. One woman dialed for help on her phone, while another knelt beside the crying but unharmed toddler. Emma stood motionless, her heart racing, watching as her dogs returned to her, wet and shivering but perfectly calm. Someone nearby whispered in amazement, "Those dogs, they knew exactly what to do." Another person added, "I've never witnessed anything like that." In that instant, everyone realized these were not ordinary dogs. They were heroes. For a few breathless seconds, no one moved. Parents held their children tighter, and strangers stared in stunned silence, having witnessed something truly extraordinary. By that afternoon, the entire town was talking about it. Someone at the park had recorded the whole rescue on video, a small girl calmly leading 6 powerful dogs, followed by those same dogs springing into action to save a child's life. The video quickly went viral, first on local news channels and then shared across social media, where it was viewed millions of times. People everywhere were astonished not only by the dogs' courage, but also by their discipline and coordination. Comments poured in, praising the intelligence of the German shepherds and the remarkable composure of the little girl with them. As more details of the story came to light, admiration evolved into something more profound. Reporters investigated further and learned about Emma, the 5-year-old girl who had not spoken since her parents' death and was now facing the potential heartbreak of losing the only family she had left, her 6 dogs. Images of Emma, small and quiet, standing between the tall, protective figures of Max, Luna, Rex, and the others, resonated with people across the country. The thought that she might be forced to part with them due to financial struggles was unbearable to many. Messages of support flooded in, and donations began to trickle, then pour, from strangers deeply moved by the bond between Emma and her dogs. Parents, dog enthusiasts, and even organizations came forward, offering help to ensure Emma would never be separated from her loyal companions. It was more than just sympathy. It was a collective resolve to protect the connection between the little girl and her dogs. Margaret and Walter were stunned by the wave of generosity. They had endured so many sleepless nights, burdened by what had seemed like an impossible decision. Now, neighbors were knocking on their door with groceries, others offered to cover vet expenses, and local businesses quietly contributed. For Emma, though she had not yet found her voice, something inside her began to change. She could feel the weight starting to lift, not just because of her dogs, but because people cared. The days that followed the rescue felt like a dream. Wherever they went, people recognized Emma and the 6 German shepherds. Neighbors dropped by daily with treats for the dogs or toys and clothes for Emma. Donations kept coming, providing more than enough to cover all the costs of keeping the dogs healthy and well cared for. The burden that had weighed so heavily on Margaret and Walter seemed to vanish overnight. But the most significant change occurred quietly within Emma. One afternoon, after the house had finally settled back into a peaceful rhythm, Emma was sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, surrounded by the 6 dogs, each lying patiently at her feet. For a long while, she just looked at them, her fingers absently stroking Max's fur. Her grandparents watched from the doorway, their hearts filled with a gentle hope. Then, something miraculous happened. For a long, breathless moment, there was only a profound silence, the kind that feels like a held breath. Emma's lips parted, and in the faintest, almost hesitant voice, she whispered, "Max." The room seemed to hold still. Max instantly perked up, his ears twitching as his gaze locked on her. Beside him, Luna let out a small bark, as if to encourage her. Emma swallowed, and then said it again, this time with more strength. "Max, Luna, Rex." She went on, her voice trembling but resolute, calling each dog's name one by one. As she spoke, the dogs responded immediately, tails wagging, eyes shining, moving closer to nuzzle against her. It was as if they fully grasped the significance of that moment. Tears welled up in Margaret's eyes. Walter turned away for a second, pretending to wipe something from his face. For the first time since losing her parents, Emma's voice filled the room, not with fear or sadness, but with love. The dogs, sensing the shift, circled her protectively, some licking her face, others pressing closer, as if to reassure her, "We're still here. We're not going anywhere." In that instant, surrounded by her loyal companions and the warmth of a community that had refused to let her fall, Emma smiled. A genuine, unguarded smile. The house that once felt so desolate finally felt like home again. Just like that, Emma's silent world was once more filled with love, loyalty, and the voices she thought she had lost forever.